morning, March 3rd, 2018. And today I'm going to begin a series on the cosmology of light. This series actually follows the completion of a 6-book series on the cosmology of light. And what I propose to do in this video series is essentially share some of the key concepts that run through this model of light. To begin with, today I'm going to share what I call the seed equation. And this seed equation exists in this model everywhere in everything, so that light is present in everything and everything is a result of light, if you will. So the seed equation essentially emanates from a reality of light where light is traveling at infinity. And I'm going to depict that by c to the base infinite. And let's assume a sphere and a source of light in the center. So since it's traveling at an infinite speed, what this implies is that light is going to be completely present in that sphere instantaneously. So there's this property of presence that exists. It also implies that if something were to arise within this sphere, then ultimately it's going to cede to the light that's present on all sides, and therefore there's this aspect or property of power. It also implies that this light, having a complete knowledge of itself and existing everywhere in that sphere, is going to have a complete knowledge of that sphere. So there's this aspect of knowledge. And it also implies that if anything that exists in here is going to be totally connected, or is going to exist in this fiber of light, and therefore there's this aspect of harmony. So if we were to summarize that, then we see that at its C infinite, there's a reality that can be expressed as some kind of function of presence, power, knowledge, harmony. Now let's take the opposite of this. Now assume that light experiments and projects out of itself something of itself, but has the exact opposite properties. So in fact it's traveling at a speed of 0. So there's a source of light within a sphere, but traveling at a speed of 0, it can go nowhere. And so rather than a presence, there's a lack of presence, so there's an absence, or we may call that a darkness. Instead of power, anything that arises around will continue to exist and persist, and so there's a complete weakness. Instead of knowledge, this light has no knowledge of anything in that sphere, so there's an ignorance. And instead of harmony, because anything that arises within that sphere can persist and almost randomly, there's a chaos. So what we have, if C were to project itself out at a 0 speed, you have a reality that's a function of darkness, weakness, ignorance, and chaos. And that's the exact opposite of light traveling at an infinite speed. But let's assume now that light projects itself out somewhere in between these two extremes at the speed that we know as c, which is 186,000 miles per second. The question is, what would the reality look like in this sphere that we live in? And we can generalize that being of a finite speed, therefore when light moves from, say, point A to B, let's assume we are somewhere on this stream of light, and we're sitting over here, and from here we can clearly see that there's a past, there's a present, and there's a future. And so the aspect of time becomes real. And further, what we also realize is that there's islands of matter, and there's a connection that exists between these various islands that have arisen within this space. So one can say that at the speed, I'm going to call the 186,000 miles per second as the untransformed layer, there is some kind of way to describe this as being having a past, a present, a future, and connection. But if we think about what past, present, future, and connection really mean, then the past is the result of everything that has already existed. So there's a kind of a stability or a physicality to it. So I'm going to call that a physicalness, or just being physical. And the present is a result of a number of forces vying for expression, so there's a vitality to it. The future is, in a sense, the result of some seed ideas, so there's some core ideas or a mentality to it, and the connection is some aspect of harmony. So somewhere over here, if we were to describe CU, then it's a function of this physical, vital, mental, and harmony that are aspects or properties of its reality. And further, we can see that there's a mapping between the physical and this aspect of presence, between the vital and this aspect of power, between the mental and the aspect of knowledge, and then connection and harmony. So what we're seeing is that there's some kind of a similarity that exists between these properties that are native to this reality at infinite speed of light and the reality at c at 186,000 miles per second. But we also know that at this reality over here, there's incredible amount of diverse material existence. So the question is, how from this reality that's animated by presence, power, knowledge, harmony, is this reality of a diverse material existence created? And mathematically, there can be a couple of transformations that allow this reality to become this reality. And let's assume that there's some layer, we'll call it K, so where light is traveling at a speed K, which is way higher than 186,000 miles per second, closer to infinite. And there's another layer N, where light is traveling less than K, but more than 186,000 miles per second. And let's see what kind of mathematical transformation would be required to basically translate this reality into this. And so we could posit that reality over here is a function of some large sets of presence. So I'll call it S, a set of presence, set of power, set of knowledge, and set of harmony, where we find seed elements that are variations of presence, power, knowledge, and harmony, essentially growing to infinite sets of presence, power, knowledge, and harmony. And so if you had some kind of a mathematical transformation that took this and created these sets, and then a further mathematical transformation that took these sets and created unique elements, the way we would depict this is it would be a function of the product of the set of power, presence, knowledge, and harmony. And what this implies is that there are infinite number of seeds that are combinations of these elements that all emanate from these sets that then become the basis for this incredible diverse material existence that we experience over here at this layer at which light is traveling at 186,000 miles per second. When we want to connect these layers together, essentially what we're saying is that the reality at CK is a function of the reality at C infinite. And then similarly, what we're saying is that the reality at Cn is a function of the reality at Ck. And what we're saying here is that the reality at Cu is a function of the reality at Cn. So in a sense, this becomes, if you will, the seed equation, but at the same time, when we know that this reality that we existed has a kind of stubbornness of persistence, an urge where there is this darkness that may arise, and we can attribute it to the influence of this layer that exists also. That's the projection of this native layer into its opposite. And so we may also say that there's this influence where the reality at Cu is also a function of the reality at C0. And so what we have then is that reality at Cu is basically a function as described here and here. So it's a combination of these two influences. The seed equation, again, I would just summarize as being this matrix here, this light matrix, and in subsequent videos I'll expand this further to show how the seed equation actually creates matrices of time and space, and how the combination of this light time space matrix actually can model anything that we see around us, anything that we are, from the architecture of quantum particles to the architecture of complex sustainable civilization, and even anything that emerges within our human spheres. So for example, thoughts and sensations, wills, urges, emotions can all be seen to be also projections of these basically fundamental four properties that animate this whole seed equation in subsequent videos.